Well, hey, I'm back here with my good friend John Hewlett, who's been the world traveler. I can't wait to hear where you've been, what you've been doing, and just it's been a while. We've had we've had a lot of things happen in this world, in our country, and in our lives personally, for the last couple of months that we haven't talked. So what's happening?
Well, I've had some great experiences for the group today. Those
Let's hear
anti
it.
so those anti-cardio miracle infomercial people yeah, if you want to listen to some interesting stuff about the gospel, about some miracles, that's what we're going to talk about today. I I have a very dear friend, Dr. Brad Nelson, who's the New York Times best author of The Emotion Code, The Body Code. Speaks all over the world. Truly one of the great people. I met him 9 years ago. He's become one of my dearest friends, and he has thousands of practitioners worldwide. He preaches the gospel indirectly and discreetly through all of his presentations all over the world. He's just a great missionary. And his grandfather, who I may have mentioned to you before, was John Alexander Nelson. And John Alexander Nelson was a 19-year-old cowboy, as Brad refers to him, from Calgary, Canada, who was called on a mission back in 1910 to Samoa. And so he went to Samoa from Calgary as a farm cowboy. And while he was in Samoa, he had the most incredible experiences, I think, of any person I've ever heard of, ever. In the islands, and he learned the language. I mean, I think like his second week there, he saw a miraculous healing of a companion from evil spirits, and some other things. But during and I'll come back to some of the miracles in a minute that are over the top. And I served 8 months in New Zealand, so in New Zealand you had the Savior on the wall. You had Joseph Smith and you had Matthew Cowley, and Matthew Cowley was, revered. And then
Yeah.
of course, we've heard of John Broberg and The Other Side of Heaven, which
Mhm.
actually I think Brad Pello that you talked about. I'm so glad that I introduced you to Brad and Melanie, and
Exactly.
so exciting because they were at the Chosen special event we had at the Megaplex in Salt Lake, and I'm so thrilled that they went with you. I'm disappointed we weren't there. But Dr. Brad, over the years, took his aunt's. His aunt worked on John Alexander Nelson's journal. He kept a very, very good journal on his mission, which is amazing in 1910 to have done that, and recorded his experiences. And then Brad Nelson, extremely successful. He pulled that together into a book, and that book's actually in print. And that's part of the story. But the experiences he had were so profound in both Samoa and Tonga that we're going to make a movie. We're going to make a documentary about it for primarily.
So he was in American and
It's
what's
just the island of
just
Samoa is before American Samoa existed,
exactly,
and then Tonga,
and then
that's
Tonga as well. Okay.
and so that's part of the miracle. So what happened was he spends his 3 years in Samoa and has amazing experiences. And so he sends in his paperwork to get his steamer pass home, because they came by boat from California. And the presidency of the church wrote him back and said, Elder Nelson, we're so pleased with your service. Would you mind staying for 3 more years? We want you to stay for 3 more years as the mission president at 22 years old.
And he's
Samoa.
single, and he's single.
Yeah, just a single guy, just a cowboy from Canada. We want you to stay for 3 more years as the mission president. Oh, and by the way, we closed Tonga a decade ago because the Samoans and Tongans were fighting so much that we closed the mission in Tonga. So your assignment is to go and heal the problems between the Samoans and Tongans, and you are also presiding over the Tongan Samoan mission. at the same time as a 22-year-old. Well, he didn't speak the language. He'd learned the language in Samoa, but he didn't know the language. And so he ends up, it's like a 3-day boat ride to get from Samoa to Tonga. And he was seasick the whole way. And when he first got to Tonga, there was a lady who had some relationships with the church. And so she organized him to have a meeting and actually, I think it was the Church of England, because the Church of England had a real presence in Tonga at the time. The French had their presence in Tahiti, but the English were early ones into Tonga. So I think he was meeting at a Church of England area, and the minister allowed him to come in, and it was one of those open air big buildings like you'd see at the Polynesian Cultural Center. And there was a large crowd assembled, and he brought along with him a missionary who could translate for him and into Tongan. And so he had reached out to First Presidency and said, hey, when they extended the call, he says, I don't speak Tongan. And they said, well, the Lord will bless you. So have faith and move forward, essentially, is what they said. So he gets to this meeting in Tonga, this first meeting, to try to help bring the saints, some of the saints, and to actually introduce the fact that they were going to be more missionaries doing some work in Tonga. And we're talking, they maybe had 20 missionaries in Samoa, and maybe 20 at a time. Not a lot, but of course they weren't that big of an island. So
is this at the time of, is it Joseph F. Smith, or would it be Heber J. Grant? I can't remember.
I think it might be at the end of Joseph F. Smith, but it's right in that transition.
Right in that time. Yeah. Okay.
So he stands up to speak, and he notices a woman over to the side of the building, and he invited her to come. He motioned for her to come and sit down, and she said no. And so she stood against like a pillar on the side of the meeting house, and he started. And so he gave his first sentence, and then the translator translated, and then he gave the next sentence, and the translator translated. And the Tongans actually had made it clear that they were kind of ticked off, even the members, that they had to have a Samoan person coming to Tonga to preside over Tonga, because they're very proud people.
Sure.
And so they had made it clear that they really wanted somebody who could speak the language, and who was focusing on Tonga, not on Samoan Tonga. There were still some feelings, kind of like Utah and BYU. So he goes into the next part of his talk, and he felt like he had a telepathic relationship with this woman who was standing at the side. And so he continued for the next over an hour speaking in fluent Tongan.
Dang.
Through the gift of tongues.
I was going to say, that's totally the gift of tongues.
So he ends up, and the people are stunned, because they knew he did not know Tongan before he had, when he first started speaking, he apologized that he didn't speak the language. And then all of a sudden, within, a paragraph, he's speaking the language perfectly. And he continued to speak the language perfectly for the remainder of those 3 years. And so they literally almost started worshiping him and taking him from place to place throughout the area to speak and to reintroduce the gospel more actively to the missionaries. So that was that experience as mission president, which is pretty amazing. But as a missionary, he had the first experience was healing and casting out the adversary from his companion, who had wanted to go home and had a bad attitude, but was, had these problems. And so he had that experience. A few months later, there was a group of missionaries, and in Samoa, the church, and this amazed me. We went to a place, and so we went on a cruise to French Polynesia. Dr. Brad Nelson, his wife, and Janet and I, we went on a cruise from French Polynesia, Tahiti, through the Polynesian islands in Tahiti, and then we went on to, but the cruise specifically, a lot of cruise boats don't stop at Samoa because it's too small. Tonga, they don't stop at. So you have to be on a smaller ship to do that. So I talked Dr. Brad into going on this journey with us. Of course, February is a lousy month, and so it's nice to go someplace warm. So
Yeah.
we waited until after the Trump inauguration, which is, I've got all kinds of stuff on that. And then we left like the next day, and we literally went, so that we went to Tahiti, and then the main purpose was to be with Dr. Nelson. So we visited temples in Tahiti, Samoa, Tonga, and New Zealand in that particular, those travels. But the purpose was we were going to film at some of the places where these miracles took place
Oh, man.
in both Samoa and Tonga, because we're going to take from his journal and make either first a documentary, maybe at some point another side of heaven type of film about this, because these are the most amazing experiences I've ever heard, ever. I mean, they're so. After he'd had the miracle as a new missionary with his companion, several months later, the church had purchased, if you can imagine, back in like 1880, 800 acres in Samoa for a plantation for pineapples and taro and other vegetables and things like that, to help support the kingdom there. 800 acres, and they're unbelievable. It's this beautiful place on top of a small mountain, and that's where they actually have a high school in Samoa, and it's just fabulous. I mean, it's really absolutely spectacular. Well, from that area of that plantation, there was a 3-mile path down to the bay of the ocean. And that's where some of the merchant ships would come in. And so the people working on the plantation would carry 100 pounds on each shoulder with like a rod with 2 big baskets on each shoulder. So they'd carry 200 pounds of produce down the mountain, the church people and other workers down to take to the ships to sell to the ships. Well, it just so happened that the mission president at the time, who wasn't Elder Nelson, he was just a missionary, had called all the Samoan missionaries to come to that area where the 800 acres was and where the bay was, to help and to have like a mission conference. So they're having a mission conference. The people are loading the ships and doing this, and they noticed over to the side of the bay a gentleman dressed in nice apparel and a hat, and all of a sudden they see him walking across the bay on the water, and he goes around the ship, and then he sees everyone and didn't really respond or communicate, but then turned around and walked back around the ship, and then to the shore, and then off into the jungle, and they never saw him again.
Oh my!
And so their first response was, the missionary says, "My gosh, that must be one of the 3 Nephites." And their mission president, after sitting there stunned, watching this fellow walking across the bay, said, "No, I think that was John the Revelator."
Wow. So this has been recorded in this elder's journal.
In his journal, and it's also in several other people's recollection and journal. There's several others. So that was the first time, and I don't know that I remember the other details, but there was a second time on his 6-year odyssey there where they felt like they saw John the Revelator again. Now, I've never heard anyone ever anywhere say they thought they saw John the Revelator. I mean, we have 3 Nephite stories in my history where, they were, the wagon was running out of control with my great grandparents, and all of a sudden a man stopped the horses, and then they went to thank him and he was gone. I mean, there's some of those stories, which are unbelievable by himself. But the mission president was there, a group of missionaries were there. We're going to try to track down if any of the other families can document that particular experience
Yeah.
because it was so amazing. So that was another one. So we actually filmed Dr. Nelson at the Bay talking and sharing that experience. And so we did little recordings and videos at each of these unbelievable spots on Samoa, and then one at the temple. So here was a fun. This was an interesting experience. So this is kind of the story of my life, and I know that people think that I have a bizarre life or whatever, but the so we're driving by in a taxi. We're driving to go on a tour of the island to find some of these places. And as we're driving, Janet looks over. She goes, "There's the temple," because we don't do planned excursions. We just kind of wing it as we go. And we go, well, and I go to the driver and said, "Pull over, pull over." So we pulled over, and just coming out of the temple were like 40 missionaries. They were having a
Oh my.
mission. They were having either an island meeting. So there were like 40 missionaries coming out. So I walk over in the crowd, and in typical fashion, I start shaking hands with the sisters and the missionaries, asking them where they're from. And, I'm from Salmon, Idaho, or I'm from California, or whatever. The fourth missionary, I shake his hand, this handsome young guy. He goes, Hemet, California. I go, Hemet, my wife Janet's from Hemet. I said, "Do you know any Duffins?" which is her maiden name. He says, "Well, yeah, my mom knows some Duffins." I said, "Janet, come over here. Meet this elder." So she comes over, she meets the elder, and she goes, "Who's your mom?" And he told her mom. She says, "She was one of my best friends in high school." No, that was his grandma. Who's your mom? And she told her mom. She says, "Well, isn't that so-and-so's daughter?" And she says, "Yeah." She says, "She was my best buddy in high school. I was a part of her conversion to the church. I was there at
Oh
her
my.
baptism. I was part of the person who introduced her to the gospel." And he goes, "Oh my goodness." And so they hugged each other, against mission rules, but Janet's 69 years old. And, and so they hugged each other, and they were talking, and and he had been out about 3 months. He was having some challenges with the language. He was at a real interesting, critical time.
Mm-hmm.
Here, out of left field, old blabbermouth John Hewlett's over there working the crowd, finding out where everyone's from and making connections. And we find a person who is the grandson of one of Janet's early conversion friends. Janet introduced the gospel to, almost 10 people in high school as a student. She's very much devoted, and always kind of wanted to go on a mission, but her dad said, "No, you should get married. Don't go on a mission," whatever. But so we texted pictures to the mother and the grandmother, and they were just so thrilled.
And I'll bet you that's exactly what that young man needed
It was no
to
question.
let
It was a
him
miracle.
know that God's thinking of him. I'm going to put these people in your life to let you know that I'm aware of you, and I'm with you, and you're going to be just fine on your mission. I'll bet you anything that's,
He's a superstar. He's a
yeah.
superstar.
Yep.
He just
Yep.
needed that, and
Yeah.
we felt that tender mercy. And I actually told him that very word. I said, "Elder, you know what this is. This is the Lord knowing you by name and knowing what you needed today." And we actually didn't know, well, just that we would meet you. And as we left, he hugged Janet again, and he said, "I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you
That's
help,
exactly right.
helping my grandmother come into the gospel."
Ah,
So we were like, higher than a kite after that. And again, there were 40 of them. I just was working the fringe of the crowd by just random happenstance and had that happen. And I don't know if I told you, uh, the year before, I like going on cruises in February, because I don't care for the weather. A year before, we had been at the Marquise Islands, which were the most remote islands almost in the world that are populated. And when we wandered off the boat, our prayer always was, "Help us find somebody we can either share the gospel with and have a nice day," and all this. And we got this taxi driver, and there was only like 4 taxis on the whole island. That's how small this island is. And the taxi driver, spoke kind of broken English and said, Mormon elders. I always go, Mormon elders, knocking on the door, or Americans. And this taxi driver said, "Oh, I'm a Mormon." I said, "Take us." I said, "Is there a church here?" He says, "Yeah, I'll take it to the church." So we drove up, in this miniature little church in the Marquise Island was there, and the elders were out there in their lavas, in their skirts, and they were cleaning up the church. It was, I think it was a Monday, and they were doing that work, and walked up to those missionaries, said hello, made some connections. One of them said, I said, "What's your name?" He says, "Elder Mortensen." "Where are you from?" "South Jordan." "Oh, I did. My grandkids who went to Harriman, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "What's your last name?" "Mortensen." And he says, "Yeah." I said, "You related to, do you know Craig Mortensen?" He goes, "That's my grandpa." So Craig Mortensen had been a client of, or a CPA for one of my biggest clients and friends, and I played golf with him all over the world, and so I knew him for years. So that was kind of fun. So we have these little miracles and those little connections with these missionaries, which was pretty fun. So back to the Samoa Tongan edition. So John the Revelator, walking on the water, speaking in tongues. So another Tongan story was when President Nelson, then as mission president, went to Tonga. He was in the upstairs office of the mission office in Tonga, and as he was in the office, there was a couple that were coming up to see him that wanted to go on a mission, wanted to serve a mission, and the woman was blind. And as she came up the stairs, President Nelson heard them and went to greet them, and said to the sister, he said, "You want to go on a mission?" She goes, "Yes, I do." And he put his hands on her head and healed her blindness.
Wow.
Right there on the stairs. So, and there's more than one examples of that in Tonga for him. Now, backstory again. The year before that, 2 years ago, Janet and I stopped in Honolulu, and we went to church. I don't know if you remember if I told you that story. We went to the Tabernacle in Honolulu, the one that the Japanese
I've been there.
Japanese tried to bomb, and it went invisible. Well, I don't know if you remember, but I met a Tongan brother there, named Wolfgram. Now, anybody in Utah knows a Wolfgram because there's a zillion of them, and they all come from Tonga. And I asked this Tongan brother at the church, this handsome, older Tongan brother, if he knew my missionary companion, Louis Wolfgram, and he said, "Oh yes, I know Louis. I knew Louis when he was younger, and they're pretty close to the same age actually." And I was talking to him, and Janet felt prompted to say, "Well, have you ever heard of President John Nelson, who was the mission president in Tonga?" And he goes, "John Nelson?" He said, "He's revered in Tonga." He said, "He healed my grandmother's blindness." So here's a guy 2 years ago. So I made a video with him talking about his mother's blindness being healed by John Nelson again. And we're not sure if it's that lady on the stairs or another one. We think it's another one. So several times President Nelson healed the blind in Tonga as well. So we're talking about amazing, miraculous stories that we feel need to be told and shared in the latter days, that the miracles. This is 1915, 1910, 1912, 1916, and all part of the ministry of John. And somebody told us when we were in Tonga, they said, "Oh, so the last story." So we get in Tonga, and we go in the airport, and they all converge on you, because in Fiji and Tonga, I mean, they get a tourist off a cruise ship, and that makes their month, because a couple $100 for a day tour or driving them around is serious money for the people. So they're really they're almost rabid to get the deal. So we get off the cruise ship, and I'm talking to this guy, and I'm looking for a bigger van so I have more room. And Dr. Brad, who usually just lets me boss around the agenda, he goes, "Oh, we need to go with this guy." And there was this older gentleman, and so we got with him. Well, he was like Mr. Magoo driving. It was like, holy cow. So we're starting off on our drive, and this guy's in his mid 60s, but looks 80. And we started talking to him. He said, and he had broken, not bad English, but not great. You can kind of understand about 50%, and then you have to pursue it. And so we're saying, we wanted to see we said we'd like to go see the Tongan temple. And he goes, "Are you LDS?" And we said, "Yes." He goes, I'm a patriarch in the Tongan. I'm a patriarch in a Tongan state, and so we're like, you're a patriarch, but of course, at one point Tonga had like 20% of their whole population was LDS.
LDS, yeah.
They converted the king a number of years ago.
Yep.
So he is a stake president, and we pursued it later. So he drove us around to all the different places, and we were talking to him, and we're like, what are the odds? I mean, here we are stumbling off the boat, and we end up it was his first day driving a taxi. He had never done it. His job with the government, he worked for the government of Tonga, and he was the doge, or he was the enforcer. He was the enforcer of the anti-smoking statute in the island of Tonga. It's against the law to smoke in Tonga. It's against the law. And he had been the enforcer for like 25 years. So he says, everyone knows me because when they see someone smoking, they call me, and I have to come and give them a ticket, or I have to tell them, that we're going to take him to jail. He had just retired like 2 weeks before. And so he decided to try his hand as a driver. He was a terrible driver. I mean, it was just like slow motion and whatever. So at the end of showing us some things, he actually has serious diabetes. And so I was sharing with him Cardio Miracle and how that could help his diabetes. And so he's really thrilled. He says, I need to take you back to meet my family. And we went back to his house. Had a really quite, looks pretty primitive, but then it was really nice inside. And we meet his wife, and his daughter comes out, and his daughter is 35, had served a mission in New Zealand, in the New Zealand Tongan speaking mission, where there's a lot of Tongans there. And so she could speak good English. And he says, I need to go lay down now. I'm tired after my first day driving. And so she drove us the rest of the way. And she was telling us about, her father and her family. They had 11 children. 10 of them have served missions. They're all over the world. Some are in Utah, some are in Australia. I mean, they're all over the place. And, talked about the Tongan schools that were so valuable to the Tongans, that were church schools and the gospel. So we had a wonderful time with her. And so when we got to New Zealand, the meetings we like are normally 11 or 12 o'clock meetings. So the only meeting that worked into our schedule for us resting and sleeping was the 12:30 Tongan ward in Auckland, New Zealand. So we drove 30 minutes by taxi to the Tongan ward, and we met. So first guy in, I'm talking to the first guy in, and the first fellow in, I asked, do you speak English? He says, oh, yes. And he says, actually, I teach English at the high school in Auckland, at one of the high schools. And I said, so where'd you serve your mission? He says, Australia. And so we talked about Australia. Really a nice fellow. We told him the John Alexander Nelson story. He gave us a couple of places that we need to visit in Tonga on the way back, or in Samoa. Hold on. Yeah, he told us some places we needed to visit in Tonga and I guess it was in the Bay of Islands or somewhere where the original canoes and people arrived into Polynesia. And that was amazing. And so we had all of these different experiences. Dr. Brad did all that. So back to the Tongan ward, the lady stands up to lead the music, and she goes in Tongan. Can't speak the Tongan. She go, the spirit, and then the whole audience would join in, the spirit. So a cappella, she would start with the first three words in this and the audience was like erupting. I mean,
Oh,
the sound, and I mean, it
I
just
know.
gave you chills because they sing with such passion. And they have some little creaky piano organ that you can hardly hear, but she was literally leading them a cappella in the hymns. And we met, just the greatest, some great missionaries and some great people, and just had miracle after miracle. And then two of the people we met on the boat, one of them said to me that he said, well, so you're from Utah? He says, do you know so and so? And I said, yeah, I know him. He says, oh, I did business with him for 30 years. And we ended up talking with he and his wife 2 times at dinner and afterwards. And they actually texted Janet yesterday. He loves the church. He grew up a Catholic, but he had had dealings with LDS people for years. He made the motors for Magic Mill
Oh
through
yeah.
the years from his business in Milwaukee, and he's very, very wealthy. Great guy. Loved LDS people, so we hung out with him and did karaoke, and I mean, we had a great time. He's retired. He's in his late 70s, and on our first, so we took a boat from Tahiti to New Zealand through the islands, and then a boat back 3 days later from New Zealand back to Tahiti.
Oh my goodness.
And so we did the double deal, which meant that I gained about 15 pounds, but it was amazing, and we kept meeting people, and so one of the things actually I need to do today is we're going to get a special coupon code or special deal on Magic Mills for the Watcher Group and others who want it. The best grinder there is. I ended up on the first cruise, ended up meeting the guy from St. George who has the entire, he owns the company, the Magic Mill distribution and the Bosch mixers. So Bosch mixers and
Awesome.
Magic Mill. And he and I became friends. We gave Cardio Miracle to him and his wife and others. We had 2 sacrament meetings on the boat with 6 other people that we met that were LDS, and they were amazing meetings, sharing testimonies and miracles in our families and those types of things. So it was really a very, very, very exciting, miraculous time, and we got a lot of footage for the movie. Oh, and the Samoan guy who speaks English, he's going to help us with some of the translation and some of the things that
Nice.
we need. So he was about a 35-year-old counselor in the bishopric who returned missionary that we happened to meet first step in when we walked into the Tongan ward. Yeah, no, Samoan ward. That was a Samoan ward. So it was pretty cool. That was the good part. And so that's the little summary of the spiritual experiences of the things that we went through. For what it's worth, for the people who are listening, I'm in day 9 of a Cardio Miracle fast. I haven't eaten in 9 days.
That is incredible.
And
How long are you going to go, do you think?
I may go until I drop dead. No, no, I've lost 23 pounds in 9 days.
So you lost the weight that you.
I gained about 15 actual pounds.
So that's gone, and now
that's gone. And I've actually, I lost 40 pounds last summer on keto and Cardio Miracle, but this morning I hit the lowest weight I've hit in 30 years.
Oh, good for you. That's so
Yeah.
awesome.
So
And you feel like you have
because,
energy and everything with
it's shocking. I mean, I don't know that I could go out and play pickleball or something, but I can. I'm actually. It's shocking how good I feel. I mean, I've had this 3rd day of the fast. I went and watched the BYU Iowa State game with my new buddy Lane Bangeter, Grant Bangeter's son, who bought Hiram Smith's ranch in Gunlock, the guy who started Franklin Covey. And I met Lane through a mutual friend, and we become great pals. He loves Cardio Miracle, but he invited me over to come watch the Trump speech and then to watch the BYU game, which was over the moon. So, but they had 5 Papa John pizzas loaded and fresh popcorn, fresh cookies, and all the soft drinks you could drink. And so I'm sipping on Cardio Miracle during watching that. So that was like the great temptation of all time. And then I've had about 5 others had to go to Snowflake, went to Snowflake to watch Janet's grandson, who was the lead in Music Man. Drove to Snowflake. I'm watching Janet eat every day as we're traveling. I'm like, but so it's more mental, but
Sure.
I really feel actually shockingly good. But I was just, for what it's worth, we were just named by a major a magazine, Top Doctor magazine. We are just named the product of the year for last year, Cardio Miracles product of the year. And so I'm speaking in Florida and in New York at the end of the month to thousands of doctors, which on the Cardio Miracle story. So I thought, I guess I better, forget about my extra large, triple X shirts and wardrobe and move down to the 2 and the 1X if I can. So I don't know. I'll probably go another few days, but I may go more than that. It just kind of playing it day to day at this point. But it's been, I've had
That's
plenty of
incredible.
opportunities, but no, it's really amazing. And the thing that's great. So I guess a couple of things on. So I don't know. So any comments you'd like to make about the travels, the miracles, the tender mercies?
Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking about, I'll just call him Elder Nilsson, who became President Nilsson. Um, it reminded me of a talk that Bruce R. McConkie gave years ago. And the talk was called, Where is the Lord God of Joseph Smith? And what he did is he went backwards. He went to the Old Testament and he talked about the story of Elijah, who was going to be taken. And Elijah puts on or I don't know exactly how it turned out, but Elisha became his replacement. Okay. And so it says Elisha took on the mantle and the priestly robes and everything of Elijah. And so Elisha then becomes the prophet, and he comes to the river Jordan, and he says, Where is the Lord God of Elijah? And he parts the water. And then as Bruce R. McConkie was explaining this Old Testament story, he said, Where's the Lord God of Joseph Smith in our day? And he goes through all the miracles that happened with Joseph Smith. And he said, So is that God left us, or have we left him? And as I was listening to these stories of Elder Nilsson, who became the mission president there in Tonga and Samoa, right? He covered both.
Yeah, yeah.
The miracles that he performed, I would ask us, where's the Lord God of Elder Nilsson, of President Nilsson, who had the faith, and he knew the people had the faith. It seems like today our faith is more in and I know I'll get a little political here, but big pharma, uh, go to a psychiatrist, do this, do that, instead of casting out the demon that's within you, having someone do that, or having the ability, the faith to do that, someone receiving their sight through a miracle. And I look back, I wish I would have had that more of that approach as a mission president to our missionaries, is utilize your faith and utilize your ability as an ambassador and as a disciple of Christ on a mission to perform those duties that you have a right to perform. And now we as individual members of the church, we should be looking for those opportunities versus always just immediately going to, what the world has to provide, I guess is maybe a good way to say it. So that's what I was thinking of. Like this is 1915, 1910, and not having to rely, or not having the ability to rely on everything that the world provides. He did what he needed to do. And in doing so, he got to see and feel and experience things that I shouldn't say we, but it doesn't happen as often, I don't think, because we have become so reliant on the things of the world. But I don't know. Those are just some thoughts. I love those
Well,
stories. I love those stories.
and the reality is, and as you really think about it, I mean, I had a miraculous experience that was life altering in New Zealand of casting out evil spirits from my favorite companion, who ultimately ended up dying. Had another experience in giving him a blessing, or praying, and that he would die after he had been ill for a year and felt like his life was over. And I had multiple miraculous healings on my mission, miraculous healings while I was a bishop, miraculous healings. Janet and I had a dozen spiritual experiences on this trip just in the last month. And so I listened to people who, for example, I was listening the other day to I don't want to promote it, but to the James Huntsman story about, wanting his tithing back. And
Oh yeah, oh, yeah.
all I could think about during that talk was David P. Hayes has got to be rolling over in the spirit world in sadness of what's happened to his posterity. I mean, I don't know how many, but a majority of some of his posterity have left the gospel, and actually are now to a place where they're actually trying to, some are probably, still reluctantly supportive or whatever, but it's just heartbreaking to me. And the fact that people get hung up on the politics, the leadership, the failings of, it's like the people who left when the Nauvoo Bank went out of business, and they left the gospel after having, or the Kirtland Society, and yet they saw concourses of angels at the temple dedication.
I know.
How does that all fit together? Well, we need to create having spiritual experiences, and I have had, it's interesting, but my one of my dear evangelical friends, Pastor Dave Bryan, the guy who held Governor Newsom at bay with his
I've met him. He's a great man.
His armed guards. I mean, they're casting out devils every day. They're dealing with healings and things like that, and they say that they're having them. We don't have a corner on healing and faith in our church. But what a shame that we don't even talk about it. We act like it's something scary, or that we're offline, or to bring up that fact. And yet those were some of the miracles that people had. We're still referring to the experiences of the Elder Richards and others in London back in, the early days of the church, as they casting out of evil spirits. Well, I can witness to you and to this audience, I have witnessed casting out of thousands of evil spirits in the last 10 years. Thousands. Don't want to go into all the details, but I've witnessed that myself. And so why? Because when I first was experiencing it, trying to figure all this out, I read everything. Elder Bushy's book, Yearning for the Living God. There's a great experience on casting out evil spirits that he was involved with. I looked at President Grant, who was Brigham Young's counselor, Jedediah Grant. Jedediah Grant, at his funeral, Brigham Young spoke and said, everything that's wrong with us in life, it can be traced back to evil energy or evil spirits. And that Jedediah Grant, who was second counselor in the first presidency and an apostle for years, the father of Heber J. Grant and others, he said, or the grandfather, he said, he was so grateful. Brigham Young said at his funeral, so grateful that Brother Jedediah would no longer be tormented by the millions of evil spirits that had plagued him in his lifetime. That's in his funeral talk from Brigham Young. You can look it up. Brigham Young's funeral discourse, Jedediah Grant. The other thing that I would recommend that was really enlightening to me is a website called uncleanspirits.blogspot.com, where there's a series of essays by an unnamed Mormon scholar that talks about all of the different types of spirits referred to in the New and the Old Testament, evil spirits, and how that all ties in. This is somebody who doesn't want any recognition. He just did it on his own, but it's uncleanspirits.blogspot.com, and it's very, very educational. But I found that now whenever I give a blessing, I rebuke evil spirits.
Yes.
Because I think that that's important. So priesthood holders and those receiving blessings, ask them to protect you, ask for ministering angels from that side, from our side of the light of the veil, and rebuke the evil spirits. Because if you don't think they're real, I'm telling you, you're missing the train, because they are real, and they're trying to destroy our country, this world, and each and every one of us in many, many deceptive ways all around us, some from within the structure and some most on the outside. So I think those are really, really important things.
I love that. I'm glad you brought that up because these things are happening. It's just that they're not being talked about enough. But the evil spirits are real, but it's just like what the Savior said to his apostles when he took them to Caesarea Philippi. He said, "The gates of hell will not prevail against you. I'm giving you power over them, and there's no
Right.
fear. You don't need to fear them." And so this is this is the power within us. No matter who we are, no matter what gender we are, we have power over those evil spirits, and we need to, I think, need to be more open about how to deal with them, how to get rid of them, and that they're real. So good stuff.
And I would say, of course, this isn't a gospel doctrine class. I would say that women are just as entitled to raise their arm to the square and
Oh,
rebuke them through the power of the priesthood, their spouses or someone else's priesthood, and we've seen that to be effective, as well as oil oriented blessings, priesthood blessings, and of course rebuking and using the tools that we've been given through the years in order to have them leave. And there's different types of spirits. This is the part that people don't understand. There's unclean spirits. There's spirits that are kind of wandering around, stuck in between the veil and the
yes,
spirit
yes.
world. There's those in the spirit world that the Savior talked about preaching to. And there are perdition spirits that are the nastiest and meanest. And I can tell you, and I mean, I won't go into details, but I've seen gnashing, gnarling, convulsions, screaming, crying, even physical grabbing types of things. That's how real I know it is. And, take it as it is. Maybe you think I'm nuts, but I'm telling you, I've seen it
No, I don't
so
think you're
many
nuts at all.
times. I'm saying, I'm sure there's listeners that are rolling their eyes, but I'm just saying, I'm telling you, as sure as I'm sitting here. And my first experience which was actually a mentoring time, was with my beloved companion, John Morley, in Auckland, New Zealand in 1972. And I literally, at the time of casting them out, after 2 days of fasting, felt as if I was in a refrigerated room of beef carcasses and had that leave the room. And I saw his personality go from not being able to learn the discussions and hating the people of New Zealand to becoming the most wonderful missionary for a month before he ended up in that process. He ended up with aplastic anemia, had to get sent home, spent a year at home, dying essentially. But the only reason he went to New Zealand, and I believe the main reason I went to New Zealand, was to help him and
Yeah.
to have that experience, because that prepared me for what I've experienced the last 10 years. And so I owe it to him. And actually, Janet and I had an experience with him. Janet's son who had passed away, my father who had passed away, my brother who was killed at 17 and passed away in the Redlands Temple, where in my mind's eye, they were all there when we were doing the endowment work and priesthood work for Janet's son, who was born with a cord around his neck and was schizophrenic and had all kinds of issues during his lifetime, and we were doing his temple work. So and there's a life full of miracles, and that's why people should go to the temple. That's why people should serve others. That's why people should study, but study to the means of having spiritually binding experiences that will sear. It's why the Savior said, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, that flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father which is in heaven." And so
Exactly.
spiritual testimonies that are far more important than any of the little doctrinal things or whatever's going on, or guidance in the handbook, or guidance from somebody giving a talk, or what we experienced the last 5 years, which basically, Scott, as you see it coming out every day, studies from Harvard, Yale, Oxford, all coming out saying that this whole pandemic thing was what we were talking about. You and I were talking about
Yeah.
3-4 years ago. It was from Wuhan. It was accelerated by Anthony Fauci, who's a criminal. It was put out there and funded by our government through the deep state. And the longer the only thing I could get on the news, few things, BBC, and I could get Fox News snippets and MSNBC, which I would never watch, but on the cruise. And every day I'd turn to Janet and say, so many good things are happening in America. Maybe we should just catch another cruise and stay at sea, because maybe us being at sea is helping to facilitate this. It's great. So I am so thrilled. And for what it's worth to the great listeners here, I helped fund Jeff Hayes's next documentary, which was made. There were three films commissioned by Maha with Robert Kennedy Jr. So we were holding our knuckles and holding on that Robert Kennedy got approved. He got approved. We're actually we're helping to fund a film, and I'm being interviewed in that film on cardio miracle, nitric oxide, and the impact it has on long haul COVID, on injection injury, because we have a scientific paper that actually says that on long haul COVID. And so that's going to be coming out, I think, in April, the first film, and Cardio Miracle and myself as an answer to immune system, prevention for dementia and Alzheimer's, prevention for cardiovascular disease, and its impact on COVID and preventing future things. And there is, and so all I'm saying to everybody is, you do really good if you take Cardio Miracle and don't worry about the injections that are being given away for free right now at Walgreens and CVS and all that other stuff. I'm now in my 18th year of not being sick one day, not one day in 18 years. Traveling, flying here, flying there, in large groups of people, being at sea. The sea was rocking and rolling between New Zealand and Tonga. We had 30-foot surges, 30-footers. And we actually, on the way back, fortunately, we had gone to Samoa and Tonga. On the way back, they actually canceled 2 of the stops because it was the waves were too bad. But helped you sleep, but it made you rocking and rolling during the day. But so it's been an exciting time in so many ways, Scott. And my son Jason's really would like to be on. You ought to get him on soon to talk to the people. And you and I talked about trying to work out. We're going to work out an event in the next couple of months for the watchers that we've talked about. Maybe one in St. George, maybe one in Heber, Camas, or Park City again, or Salt Lake.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And maybe it'll be around the screening of one of these films or something like that.
Oh, that'd be great. I wanted to make a little announcement. So I got an invitation from the Firm Foundation Conference, the Book of Mormon Evidence, and they are going to have me. I'll be in one of the small auditoriums, but this will be on April 18th. It's on a Friday afternoon at 2:15. So 2:15, April 18th, the Firm Foundation Conference. To be honest, I don't even know where it's being held. I'll have to look that up. But I thought I'd announce that, so anybody that wants to come, I'll be talking about the Old Jerusalem and the New Jerusalem. And
what's the date of your Israel cruise, Scott?
So the Israel, yeah, it's not a cruise, but it's the Israel.
I'm sorry. No, it's a land. It's a tour.
Yeah, it's a tour. So it's on with Legacy Tours of Utah. It's on their website, but the Israel portion of the trip, which is the main portion, 10 days in Israel, is November 1st. Yeah, this fall. But there is an add-on before that. It'll be 4 or 5 days in Egypt, and then we have Israel in the middle. And then if people want to add on a little additional while you're over there, we'll be going to Jordan after that. So you can make it, you can do, the main one is Israel, and you can either do an add-on at the end or an add-on in the front or do both. So it's going to be quite a trip. And we had a great trip in just a few weeks ago in Israel. We pretty much had Israel all to ourselves. It was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. So lots
Would
of
have
fun
loved,
things.
would have loved to have been on that. And I'm gonna put this on the calendar. Our calendar is kind of crazy, but I'd love to do that. We got our tour to Israel canceled 3, 4 years ago because of the COVID craziness, and so
And then the war,
in the war.
most of yeah, we've had two trips cancel on us. So we're hoping that with the new administration on the U.S. side and things happening, that things will calm down in the Holy Land, and we'll be able to keep doing those. So this has been an awesome discussion. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. One last thing I just want to mention to our 2,000 customers of Cardio Miracle from the Palmer's situation. We are HSA and FSA approved. HSA. So if any of you are younger than Scott and I and still working a normal job and have an HSA program, we're approved. Callie and Casey Means, some of the key people in the Robert Kennedy confirmation, they got us approved. They've got
That's
us
so
approved.
awesome.
And so when we're calling people and customers, and just for a second, trying to save you money, that we're telling people if you'll upgrade to a 180 serving our pouch, and then people are putting it in a Tupperware or in one of their old canisters of Cardio Miracle, but the 180 takes our cost down to $1.28 a serving, $1.28 a serving for a product that would cost you $7 to $8 to produce on your own. But when you get it through your HSA, it's under $1.
Dang.
It's unbelievable. So anyone who has HSA, the other thing is you may have a son or daughter or a brother or a sister that has an HSA, and you could do a little family reimbursing or however you want to do it. But you can get your Cardio Miracle for $1 a serving through an HSA, buying our 180 pack. So we're asking people, because it saves us money if we're shipping once every 2 or 3 months instead of every month with our free shipping. So we're asking people, help us keep our costs down. I was in shock the other day. I went and bought 3 rolls of stamps. It was $300. It was almost $300.
I know. Stamps are ridiculous.
I said, where have I been that stamps went from 45 cents to 73 cents each? Yeah. 73 cents each. And a large box was over $30. $30 to ship. So if anyone doesn't think it's a bargain to get free shipping with Cardio Miracle, or even the $14.97 that we charge regular people, try going to the post office. So shipping is never free, but we're doing everything possible. I get texts on my cruise. How nice is it? Every couple of days, I'm getting a text from another person who's saying, my husband's arrhythmia is gone. His diabetic testing numbers have never been better. His insulin usage has gone down. My neuropathy is getting better. Well, let me tell you, if you want to feel better, go on a 2, 3, 4, 5 day Cardio Miracle fast, and at the same time protect your immune system and build yourself up for good things in the future.
On that, just another thought I had on this is most of the people on our trip to Israel were Cardio Miracle users, because most of them listen to this show. And you know what? You can say it's just by chance or whatever, but we all stayed strong and healthy and happy, and it was just wonderful. And like you say, when you're on planes and buses,
trains, and
automobiles, man, you're exposed to just about everything. It's quite an onslaught. And then just can you mention, I know the intermittent fasting is a big thing right now.
Oh yeah.
How does cardio, can you still,
yeah. Yep.
Can you address that for just a second? Like
yes,
how that ties into intermittent fasting?
I'd be happy to. There's a thing called autophagy. Autophagy is the mitochondria, which is the cell, and how it cleans itself. or how it discards the waste products. As you process glucose or sugar or carbs or protein, it creates waste product along with energy. So the waste product is impacted through autophagy. Our last scientific paper said Cardio Miracle stimulates autophagy. So that it softens the arterial wall. It increases your blood velocity and force, which creates the nitric oxide, which heals the lining of the artery, and it increases the lymphatic function, the contraction in the body. The lymph is going backwards, back to the heart. It isn't going forwards like the blood is being pumped, and then the lymph has to bring its way back. That's a contraction. Cardio Miracle has been scientifically validated that increases that contraction, and it facilitates autophagy. So you actually get better, you lose weight faster on Cardio Miracle. And so if you intermittent fast and give your body 18 hours of rest or 16 hours or whatever you can live with, and you can take Cardio Miracle during the fasting period like I'm doing, I've lost 23 pounds in 9 days, which of course I have more than most to lose, but it's shocking. But if you take it during the fast, it does not break your fast for intermittent fasting.
Okay,
so
good.
Take the Cardio Miracle during the fasting period. It facilitates the lymphatic withdrawal and the cleansing and cleaning out of your system. And it gives you enough energy from the fruits and vegetables and the nitric oxide. And then you do your keto diet, if you want to do keto or Mediterranean after the fasting, and then finish your day with the Cardio Miracle. It's probably the best thing ever. And people say, well, I can't afford it. Well, stop drinking the Diet Coke, stop eating the processed foods, stop wasting your money. There's a lot of people now who are actually going to a phase in life where they're saying, I'm drinking Cardio Miracle twice a day and eating one meal a day and feeling better and getting on top of their issues, which I've had issues for years. And I decided to do this, and this is just a self-disclosure because I don't know if I mentioned it to people or not, but I've been fighting skin cancer for 25 years, very actively. That's why I have a dent in my head here, and I have a scar here. I mean, I tried traditional dermatology, and then I went to natural remedies, the black salve, other things, the eggplant. I mean, I've done it all. Well, unfortunately, I had some on my head that got out of control. And I battled them for 9 years. I finally decided I needed to take them off. And I was very against doing that, but it was almost like I had two horns on my head. And so that's why I wore a hat all the time. So other than church, and it was kind of embarrassing to be in a ward where everybody's talking about each other's health problems and having them all the time kind of looking at me and say, what the heck's on your head? And because my cardiovascular is fine. I have energy. I never get sick, but I have skin cancer, and there's some reasons for that. But the reality is, I finally had them surgically removed. It was like being scalped. They took off a good portion of the back of my head. The skin grafts healed in less than a week because of Cardio Miracle. But unfortunately, there's some of the they weren't able to get it all. So I still have a battle with compromised basal and squamous cells. And so I decided that it was time for me, sorry, people keep calling me, that I needed to take the battle to the forefront for the sake of my grandkids and Janet. So I decided, okay, I didn't totally splurge on the cruise, but I enjoyed myself. But then I said, okay, I've got to bite the bullet. And so I'm biting the bullet. And so I'm going to starve those suckers any way I can through what I'm doing. So that's, but the reality is I've had a wonderful, miraculous healing of the surgery. I didn't want to do it. I decided to do it, but now I'm attacking what I believe was the cause, which is parasites. And part of the cleansing process is starving the parasites. And that means sugars, and Cardio Miracle only has 10 calories, or maybe it's 20 now with the addition of a couple things, but minimal calories. And you can take 2, 4, 6, as much Cardio Miracle as you want on the intermittent fasting. But I'm just finding that it was time for me. And so appreciate it's, I have 18 grandkids and I have a great business and I have approaching 40,000 customers.
Dang,
And
that's
it's
awesome.
gonna go into the hundreds of thousands. I had an epiphany a few months ago that I'd saved over 1 million, helped influence over 1 million lives, and now I want it to be 100 million before I check out. So that's the effort. We love the Palmer Group. We love Scott and Sue, and this has been truly the best relationship that we've had of all of our relationships. We're now on Walmart.com. We've got back on Amazon over some Gadianton robbers that were trying to do some bogus losses. We just got back up on Amazon. We're going on Parler. We're going on Moms for America is putting us out as for their 500,000 moms. We have, the Maha film. We're going to be endorsed. We have 3 initiatives in front of the Maha Group that all include Cardio Miracle and making America healthy again. So I haven't been able to solve my skin cancer problem, but that's primarily been diet, stress, and my own problems over the last 50 years. But now I'm going to take it on head on, and hopefully we'll get a positive result. But God bless all of you, and any of you who truly can not afford 1 serving a day at $1 or whatever, please text me, please email me, and we're more than happy to help those in true need, which we've done a number of those types of people who have disabled children or husbands that are whatever, or family members that are incapacitated. But I can tell you, if you go on a Cardio Miracle, intermittent fasting, Mediterranean or keto diet, most of your health problems will start diminishing almost immediately.
Dang, so good. Well, I think that's where we ought to end this one. This has been such a good visit. God bless you, John. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for your just the relationship that we have rekindled over these last couple of years. It's been awesome.
Awesome. It has
All
been.
right.
So thanks.
All right. God bless.
Take care. Thank
Okay.
you.
Talk
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye-bye.